It's lovely to be here and lovely to see what WIMSIG is doing. It was, I'm hoping Leslie is around. So that first team that we formed back in 2000, it was mostly 2013 to 2015 that we worked on it with Leslie and Joanne and Amy Glenn and Zhang Nguyen. It was wonderful. We had, even then, we had Skype meetings every month. So in a way, WIMSIG is used to doing this, not live. Not live. So I'm just going to, so I thought because this is WIMSIG and not just a research conference, I would look at a little bit more than just what my research is. So I'll start with, so I basically want to give a very brief outline of my journey in this minefield that I didn't realize was a minefield in academic mathematics. And so the research that I do, and the path I took to get where I am, and then how I went from being a support person or being viewed as a support person. Let me put it that way, being viewed as a support person to being a driver of change, and how I continue to negotiate this path. So, I saw some of the questions that were put to the panel. So I'm hoping maybe my journey will help answer some of those questions, but feel free to ask those questions of me if you want to. So anyway, I've got half an hour, so let me get to it. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the country. I acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation on whose unceded lands I live. And I, as an employee of RMIT, conduct the business of the university. I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business. And this picture here that you see is an artwork. It's called Wurrung Bilik, The Law of the Land by Vicky Cousins, and it is a possum coat. It's a huge possum coat, and the spirit of the land is supposed to wear that possum coat and keep an eye on all of us and look after us. So, and that's in the middle of RMIT. So when we used to go in, I think this is, I don't know, 200 and how many days, Jessica, Jen? No clue to how many days of lockdown we have been here in Melbourne. So, and I used to go to work, I would see that every day, sometimes several times a day as I crossed the campus. It's right in the center of the campus, on that main street called Bowen Street. So don't get to see it, but it still reminds me of this land and that these lands have not been ceded to us, that we are guests on this land and we need to treat it with that respect. So, okay, so continuing on, I thought I'd do a little bit of a word cloud of the stuff I do. So you can see there's a whole bunch of things. I'm, of course, professor and associate dean of mathematics, being a superstar of STEM as well. Cybersecurity is the main research. I was asked, actually, a couple of, maybe a month or so ago by somebody, because I write myself, as I have done in the little blurb that Jen read out, I write myself as a transdisciplinary researcher, but it comes across as I am just spread out, sprinkled, scattered, and the person said, okay, so that is what is coming out. So how are you going to address it? How? And I thought about it, and I thought that isn't actually correct. What I do is cybersecurity, and I do it in many, many different ways, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So, and then I also have, you can see I'm very active on Twitter. I'm totally crazily active now. I am a cybersecurity specialist, so it's very, very hard for me to actually be on social media. So every time I want to post something on Twitter, I have my brain goes a little bit crazy with bells and whistles. I'm saying, do you really want to post this? Do you want to say this? Who's going to look at it? What are you going to do about it? So all of that, but part of being a superstar of STEM require, we got a lot of training on going onto social media. And I had one of my sister superstars of STEM. So one of them, Eva, was in the panel, but another one really pushed. really pushed me to get onto Twitter. And I have reached out to, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, reached out to a huge number of school teachers, which is why there is school teachers somewhere sitting here, if I can find it. Yeah, it's over there. So this is basically, these are the words that could describe me. But as we all know, we are all three-dimensional, and a two-dimensional bunch of words don't actually describe any of us. Often that is what happens with a CV, or when you're talking, you are trying to take a three-dimensional person and shove yourself into a two-dimensional scape. So anyway, so this is some of the words that describe me. And so here's my research. So I started, so back in, so how shall I, all right, so I'll give my journey a little bit later. So let me just talk my research. So my research started, my PhD was in something called Bayer-Star rings. Bayer-Star rings is basically the algebraic setting in which C-star algebras and von Neumann algebras sit. So it's the algebra which sits within functional analysis. And the star stands for anti-homomorphism. And that's what I did my PhD in. And I came to Australia just after I submitted my thesis. Now, the problem there was that I submitted my thesis in 2 years. Not because I wanted to finish a PhD in 2 years, but because circumstances forced me to do that. I came to Australia and I couldn't find anybody who was working in that area in functional analysis. So I changed. I started a second PhD, which I never completed, with Kathy Harraden, who's now emeritus professor at RMIT. And I've started working on Hadamard matrices with her. So as I was working on Hadamard matrices, I realized the connection with error correcting codes, which is how Kathy looked at it more from a design theory point of view. I realized you could actually use them in error correcting codes. So as I looked at it from error correcting codes, I then found that I could go and look at it from cryptography and MUBs. So the journey from Hadamard matrices to error correcting codes to cryptography and MUBs took actually about, I would say, about 15 years. That took 15 years. So this is my 29th year, my 30th year at RMIT. I started the first few years, quite a few years, as a casual tutor. And then on a quarter and a 1/3 and a half position, all sorts of fractions. I'm a real mathematician. I even had a fraction of, so there was a quarter, and then there was a 0.33, and then a 0.52, right, all the fractions, right? So before I became full-time in 1996, and then became ongoing in 98. Anyway, so that took 15 years. And then in the next 15 years, I did everything else. I just went totally crazy. So what I realized at that point, we got cryptography and error correcting codes, they all fit into what is now called cybersecurity. In the past, it used to be called information security. And I still feel that is the right word. And as I tell my students, cybersecurity, the buzzword for now. But it's not really right. We are not cyber. We are definitely information. Most of what is known about us can be put together as information. And so information, so securing information is equivalent to securing our identity, securing everything we do, because ultimately, especially now, we are human beings, we are flesh and blood, but at the same time, we are sitting as a digital something. Bits of information, zeros and ones in a whole bunch of computers and information systems. So that's when I realized, and I started to look at, what could we do in cybersecurity? So we had by then, and so this is going back to about 2007, 2005, 2006, we had a Master of Information Security at that time. And from 2004 to so basically end of 2003 to the end of 2005, I changed that degree to make it a 2-year degree. And as part of that, it became a Master of Information Security and Assurance. And as part of that change, I had to learn risk management. And this was information systems risk management. It had nothing to do with mathematics. It was the standards. So at that time, Australia was the only country which had an information systems or a risk management standard, AS/NZS 4360, and industry wanted me to teach that. And one of the things I realized as I was teaching it is that the technology, the mathematics, and as one of the great gurus of cybersecurity will say, the technology is good, the mathematics is fantastic, cryptography does work, but people are the weakest link. So it's not mathematics which is going to fail us, it's people who are going to fail us. And for us to be able to protect against that weakness in that link, in that security chain, we need to do risk management. And I have really understood that. And I have been teaching it for the past 15 years now. I have been teaching risk management, information systems risk management. I teach the standard, and I really started thinking of it on that basis. So while I was doing that, the Association for Prepaid Cards in Australia reached out to me in around mid-2008 or early 2008 and said, could you give us a talk about how to secure prepaid cards? And this was a bunch of industry people. And of course, they had no clue on the mathematics. So I had to give a talk on the risk management. So I got a team of master's students, and not masters by research, masters by coursework. And we looked at what were the risks with prepaid cards. And what that led us to was the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Act of Australia. And it showed clearly that there was a gap. There was a gap, the big companies, and you will have heard on the news, where I think Westpac was fined, I don't know, $780 million a few years ago. And this year or last year, Commonwealth Bank was fined $1.2 billion for not tracking money laundering. And the crazy thing about the Anti-Money Laundering Act is that you can't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody. So, I have done research in it. So both from a sort of a management perspective, and that is what got me invited to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime every year, and they stopped it with the pandemic, but about 4 years. So they did it in 2013, and then 17, 18, 19, and I don't know if they were going to do it in 2020. They have had intergovernmental meetings on cybercrime, where you have all the government's bodies sitting there and discussing how they are going to stop cybercrime. Because cybercrime is a trans-border, a transnational crime. You can't stop it just by one country. And that's where the fact that I had done this research on anti-money laundering and on prepaid cards is what got me to their attention. They had asked me before that to conduct a survey, to give them not to conduct a survey, to answer a survey on behalf of RMIT. So anyway, so while I was looking at that, I then got in around 2012, I had a PhD student who wanted to work in money laundering. So we did it from a more, the complex networks point of view. So that's where the complex networks came in. Back in 2009, the Department of Defense, Australian Department of Defense, somebody from there reached out to the three of us and asked us to come up to speed. They funded the three of us to come up to speed on complex networks. So that's one of the things I did. I learned complex networks at the same time as risk management, and then I was able to put it together to track money laundering. And we came up with a way which was much, much faster than the algorithms that were known at the time. So community detection, we were able to do, put together the stuff from statistics, from complex networks, motives and things like that to track money laundering. At the same time, the complex network side, it's used a lot for social network analysis. So that's the other side that I looked at it. So I had a student who was looking at tracking, or rather looking at campaigning online. So how does campaigning online translate to success in the actual elections? And until then, most of the people, and even now, they just look at, for example, number of likes on a Facebook page. They look at the number of, on Twitter, how many followers, but does that actually, and being now quite active on Twitter, I realized that a lot of the people on Twitter actually lurk. They don't interact. They will follow someone and they will lurk. So you have, how do you calculate, how do you actually work out what is the influence of these people? And that is some of the research that I'm trying to do. At the same time, I had an architecture student, doing a PhD in architecture who wanted to look at it. And she looked at collaborations and networks of physical, when you had physical meetings, because that's how architects work. They like to have big workshops where a whole bunch of people sit together, in teams, and they all have a challenge. So she looked at, how can you use complex networks to understand, how people are interacting. So there is things in complex networks, things like, betweenness centrality, which basically looks at, is there sort of like a linchpin who connects different networks? There is also the person. So if you look at it at Twitter, the person who's got the most number of followers could be thought of as somebody who has high degree centrality. So it's got a high degree of in connections. But what does that mean? Can they influence? And we have seen over COVID how people can influence in the wrong way. All right, so that was some of the things. And also with complex networks, some of the more recent work that I'm doing is with Sivandi, is looking at anomaly detection. So we are trying to use statistics and complex networks to work out how do you detect an attack is going to happen, a cyber attack is going to happen before it actually happens. So that's some of the work that we are doing. At the same time, IoT security, I have got a PhD student who's working. I have a co-supervisor from CSIRO, Data 61, and we are looking at how, with the number of IoTs, apparently by about 2025, there will be 25 billion devices online. So a device could be your phone, your computer, your iPad, but could also be now with the way it's going is your light bulbs, your fridge, all those little tracking apps that you have in your phone, your watch. It could, and and there's a crazy thing is that there are companies who are inserting Bluetooth connectivity. And I remember reading this case of a company where they bought the hot water heater, and it has got the Bluetooth password written on it. Okay, first problem. And where it is installed, it's only the neighbor who can read the Bluetooth password. They can't do anything with it without getting the password. They cannot actually read the password because it's in a position where, so you can see the major security problems that are going to come up with the IoT. And so that is what we are looking at. But the IoT devices, most IoT devices, these little Bluetooth things don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of capacity. It's like, for example, the example that comes to my mind is, did you know that the computer that got Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Aldrin to the moon had less capability than our current phones, forget that, even our current calculators. They had less capacity, so less resources, less capability. And that's what's happening with the IoT devices. So we have to work out how do we secure these IoT devices when there is quantum computing, which is coming up, which can break classical cryptography. So how do we bring in, quantum, what they call post-quantum cryptography. So that's one of the things. And in all of this, the thing is, I'm looking now at, and also I had, because of some of the work I did, helping a PhD student out, I now have funding from the department, from DST, with regards to having a postdoc in submarine control. So I am definitely all over the place, but everything is then connected back to security and cybersecurity. And the great thing is I put a little arrow here, is I'm hoping to now use the ideas that were there from Biostar Drinks into networks, collaborations with one of my new staff members at RMIT, Geetika. So, all of this is coming together. It's just fascinating. What is possible? What is possible? So the important thing, the message I'd like you all to take is, don't think you can't stretch out. Don't think you have to do research in a narrow bound, in a narrow field. Be open to ideas. Be open to new ideas. So anyway, I'm looking at the time, so I better get going. So this is what my life was like. This has been my journey. A river, as you see, what happens is lots of dead ends. Flow around, oh, okay, there's a dead end. Let me find another way. And that's exactly how my life is going. And we have to always think like that. A river doesn't ever stop just because there are frustrations, there are roadblocks. It doesn't. So let's find another way. And that's what I did. I have found many, many different ways to go forward, to find a new way of doing things, so when I found that, and one of the things I was thinking about is that, as somebody pointed out, you do the work, but the person, especially the male who is in this thing, gets the credit. And I still remember that when I put in for promotion one year, I had Kathy say that, she was the person who did this. The comment I got back was that there was Kathy and there was somebody else. They must have done it. So those are the barriers we face. But don't let that stop you. Don't let those barriers stop you. Like the river, find another way. Go around. To the extent that I've gotten so used to going around, I remember saying this to my to my dean, I think in 2019, saying, "Oh yeah, I can work around somebody," and he says, "No, Asha, you will work with the person." I was like, "Okay, sure, fine." So that's what I'm saying. So how did I go from being a supporter to the driver of change? So back in 2007, this is where I applied. So this is for people, if you don't know already. If I applied for promotion from senior lecturer to associate professor 4 times before I was successful, 4 times. And the first 3 times I got stopped by that because I was considered a support person and not a driver of change. I was just holding up the building or the discipline or whatever, being a little cog in the wheel. But I needed them to realize that I was the driver of these changes. So what did I do? I stopped focusing on the promotion. And sometimes when I say it, people turn around and say, oh, that means that I was not engaging. No, that is totally wrong. I was engaging, but I was engaging in the way that I wanted to engage. I was doing the things that gave me pleasure. I still ticked the boxes, but I found that by not talking about it, by not telling people this is what I'm doing, I was able to do better, to change how my life was going, to change how I was perceived. So that's one of the many more very important things I want to say to you all. Don't stop, but at the same time, find pleasure in what you're doing. Then you can do it with passion. You can do it with passion. So one of the very important things that I do is gender equity. And as you all already know, founding chair, whatever, of WIMSIG. But when I was asked to go onto Twitter, onto social media, I sat back and I thought, why do I want to go? Because as I told you all, there is this voice in my head, the cybersecurity voice, which says, don't put this, don't put that. So if you go on to Twitter and you follow me, you'll see I put almost no personal facts there, other than the fact that I've got vaccinated. I put very little in this thing, and I'll give you lots of photographs of the sky in the evening when the sun is setting and all sorts of crazy stuff. I won't talk about myself. And so when I went onto Twitter, I sat back and I thought, why do I want to go onto Twitter? And that is a time when I've been thinking about, the fact that there are fewer girls doing mathematics in high school. So I thought, okay, so maybe I can reach out to the teachers. If the teachers are on Twitter, if I reach out, so they are the people who are producing the product that we use. Okay, school teachers, they produce that product, which we as university academics use. So that's why I went onto Twitter. I'm very, very active from that point of view. I reach out, and I'm quite proud to say that, most of my followers are school teachers. And one of the things that happened on Wednesdays, I beamed into a classroom in Scotland, into a primary 6-7 class, to talk to them about mathematics, to talk to them about cybersecurity and how mathematics fitted in. So that is how I have decided that, yes, we can do a lot of things at our level, but we need to go down. We need to come and pull up more girls. And how do we do it? By being role models. So that is one of the ways I'm looking at gender equity. So finally, what is my aim? To make women more than a curiosity, to help them stand out, and through research or anything else that I can do. But I think I've come very close to 4:30, and I'm sure I hope you all have lots of questions for me. So please, thank you. And thank you, Jennifer and Jess, for asking me to speak. And any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks very much, Asha. If everyone can join me in thanking Asha for her presentation. Are there any questions? You can either unmute yourself and just ask directly, or you can put it in the chat box.
Stop sharing so I can see more of you.
If not, then I can get us started. So I was interested in one of the comments that you made about feeling like your skill set was a little bit scattered, and I was interested in whether or not you've got any comments about having that depth of knowledge in certain areas versus an expansive set of skills, and yeah, just any comments you have on that.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is when I look at it and I think I'm scattered, and that's when when the person, somebody from RNI, who I have known for many, many years at RMIT, she said, I should think about it, where do you fit? And I realized, as it says in my thing, it's algebra, which I use. And so in all of this, I use algebra. But cybersecurity sounds so much more sexy. Because it's very applied. It's very applied. So I can say I'm an algebraist. And people, I remember I gave a presentation in early 2019 to the Bureau of Met, and this person had difficulty pronouncing the word algebraist. So, I thought it doesn't really work outside of, mathematics. So how do I become more, if I want to make change, I need to be more accessible. So which is why it is cybersecurity. So it is applied, and all of it is applied mainly to cybersecurity.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Any other questions, Asha?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would, as if I don't have enough time in RMIT to ask, but going through, your the presentation and everything. So when you get these setbacks, which people do get, but some people go on, so how do you build that kind of the core? How do you go about building it, strengthening it?
Strengthening, okay, so I'm not sure I totally understand. Okay, so let me try and answer it, Sivan. You can correct me what I'm saying. So one of the things I remember Kathy saying to me after I was rejected for promotion the third time round, Kathy said to me, Asha, don't get cynical. Nobody likes somebody who's cynical. And I remember I was angry all the time. I was getting angry at the drop of a hat. And I'm not the sort of person, just not the sort of person who will yell and scream at anybody. All I would do is go to my room, office, close my door, and literally cry in frustration and anger. I'm just so frustrated, so angry. And then one day I realized I was just doing that, saying, the only person who's suffering is me, because nobody even knew I was so suffering. I was just, it was just me. So that's when I decided, okay, so I have to think about what I am doing and how am I going to fix this? How am I going to get better at it? And it was just before that, in the early 2000s, I did a 6-week internship at Ernst & Young. And at the end of that, in their risk advisory service. And at the end of that, I was asked if I would like to join the company. And my answer was, no, I think I will give research another chance. And I remember my line manager, he was an executive director there, and he turned around and he said to me, Asha, how long have you been at RMIT in academia? And I said, 15 years. He said, oh, you would be thought flighty if you left now, did you? So, but it made me think, what did I want to do? And I loved research. It's hard to do research, especially at RMIT. We have quite a lot of admin and stuff that keeps getting piled on, but it's possible to find the time. And that's what I did. When I was so frustrated, I decided I was going to think about research. I was going to do what I wanted to do in the way I wanted to do. I wasn't what you would call a traditional mathematician. Well, actually, back in 1998, when I applied for promotion for, or 98, 99, something, when I applied for promotion for senior lecturer, one of the advice that I was given by the promotion panel was focus on one thing, you're too scattered. That hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen anymore. So that's what I do. So find what gives you pleasure and just do it. Just do it.
Thanks, Asha. I think there's a question from Hamadeh.
Yes, thank you so much, Asha. That's very inspiring. I mean, I was thinking of it. Wow, we should catch up. We're both in Melbourne.
Yes.
And we should catch up on many different, multiple aspects that you just shared. Thank you. And I was wondering your experience working in, multidisciplinary field, I should say, coming from the Hadamard matrices that you use, move to complex networks, but working with the security and defense team, what was the most challenging and what was rewarding for you? To, people sit back and say, do I really want to do that?
Yeah, so what was challenging was, I still remember this, Kathy saying to me, I should dye my hair. It was like, this, right now it is actually dyed, but at that time, so this is about 20 years ago, Kathy said, you should dye your hair. And I said, why? I mean, what do you mean? She said, you should dye your hair white because nobody thinks you're old enough. I remember in 2000, yes, so in 1997, I was at, I think it was 1997. Yeah, something like 1997. I was at Las Vegas for a conference, and there was a bunch of us. It was actually, the conference was at the University of Nevada. It was on combinatorial mathematics, and we had, it just started bucketing down here, and we had, we were wandering around the the gambling, all of those places, and somebody waved to me and said, you are below 21. You're not allowed to be here. Guys, I was 34. I just turned 34. As you can see, that has been, and I remember when the defense came with their project and Kathy said we should have Asha on, and the person said, oh, but we don't want any PhD students. And she laughed and she said, she is a senior academic. She just don't go by how she looks. So that has been a challenge, looking as I do, which is really crazy. Everybody wants to look young. But it has been held against me. It has been held against me. I think the enthusiasm I show as well, maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know.
I see. That's challenging. I was hoping you have some solution to. That's the key. You said that's my job.
Yeah,
take us seriously.
Yeah, what's the solution? Is not to give up, not to stop, not to let anybody stop you. Nobody has ever stopped me. And that, I think, is the important thing. As I say, if you can't go, be like a river. If you can't go one way, find another way. Don't think that I can't go this way. Consequently, there is a problem, or with me or with the system. No, just find another way. And there are ways. You can only be stopped by yourself. That is my mantra. That is what I say to myself and to everybody. You are the only person who can stop you. If you don't stop yourself, nobody else can.
It looks like we have another question in the chat. So Tim McCougar asks, is there a particular way that you engage with teachers on Twitter?
Okay, so one of the things I found out, and this was also by the same person who asked me to come onto Twitter, she pointed out there is something called primary STEM chat. So there are chats on Twitter. There are it's called Twitter, EDU Twitter, and they have chats at different times, usually in the evening, sometimes on a Sunday night. It used to be, and at one point I was doing it on a Monday night, a Wednesday night, a Thursday night, a Sunday night. I was going a little bit crazy. Now, most of them have dropped off, but there is the one on Thursday nights, and I engage. So often what happens is, because it's called primary STEM, people think it's for primary school teachers or even just for school teachers. And often I go in thinking, what can I say about this? But I always find, and I've learned a lot from them. from those teachers. And they also listen to them when I give my experience. And I just give the experience I have in my classroom, even though it's not a school. I often say, give the caveat, okay, these are postgraduate students. I teach master's students. Forget this thing, primary or secondary. But, for Australian reading, there was a reading hour about 2 weeks ago, 9th of September, I think. I reached out to somebody on Twitter and I said, do you want me to beam into your class? And she teaches grades 1 and 2. And I read to them. So that's the thing is you have to engage. You have to engage. You have to be positive. You have to be passionate. You have to engage. That's the only thing that works. Don't expect things to come to you. Go and get them, whatever it is.
That's really great advice. Are there any other questions for Asha? There is another question in the chat from Butika. As we widen our horizons for research areas, do you have any suggestions for supervising students when you're doing multidisciplinary research?
Okay, so one of the things, so I should give you this anecdote. So what happened in 2015, early 2015, one of our, there was one of those, those constant rounds of voluntary departure packages, and one of my colleagues took the package, and his student was a PhD student, was in her final year, and she got no supervision. She came to me and she was in control theory. She was doing unmanned aerial vehicles. Where's algebra? Where's unmanned vehicles? They write a page of equations, which I don't have. They have, they want to reduce this error factor, and I have no clue. And she came to me early because I do know, and I do interact with students a lot. She came to me early in that year, just after he retired, and he said, Asha, can you be my senior supervisor? And I went to Kathy and she said, Asha, don't be silly. It's not your area. Don't reach out to that extent. It's not good. So I said, okay, no, I can't. It's not my area. She was in her 3rd year, and there was somebody else who had stepped up as senior supervisor. I thought, that's fine. Yeah, she'll be fine. And then what happened is in around August, I had to go to India. I came back and I found she was exactly where she had been in January that year. Nothing had happened. And I thought, I can't, I was extremely busy. I had 5 PhD students at that time. But I thought, I can't let this happen on my watch. So I said to her, I called her in. I am quite foolish. I called her in and I said, okay, we're going to keep this under the radar. I'm not going to tell anyone, but I'm going to supervise you. And she said, yeah, that's fine with me. And hey guys, you know me. Is it possible for me to do anything under the radar? So I said to her, okay, you set a time, a time for your 3rd milestone, and we'll do it in the first. So this was mid to late August. You will do it in the 1st week of October, the 2nd week of October. And she said, Asha, really, do you think we can do it? And I said, yes, you can do it. Let's do it. And she set the date, and I happened to walk into the staff room, and the person who was her nominal senior supervisor said, oh, I can't do that date, so we will move it. And I said, no, you won't. And John Hahn, the head, turned around and he said, what do you mean? And I said, I'm supervising her. So she will do it when I say she's going to do it. And you're not moving it because you can't do it then. And John Hahn turned around to me and he said, okay, if you're supervising her, you get on as senior supervisor. So I managed to get her through her PhD by the end of early 2016, January 2016, she submitted her thesis. And now I have a paper in control theory on unmanned aerial vehicles, on fault-tolerant control. And I sit there and I think, what do I know about this? But the crazy thing is that's when I got about about $1.5 million to $2 million of funding from DST, because they wanted to employ her as a PhD, as a postdoc, and the funding came to me. And since then, she's working somewhere else. But I have another postdoc in that position, and she's working on flexible arm robots, and just submitted a paper with my name on it. And I found that the more I listen to it, the more I understand. Come on, guys, we have done a Bachelor of Mathematics and our Master of Math. How difficult can it be? I'm not doing the research myself. I'm guiding research. So I sit and I read and I say, okay, so how does this work? I ask them to explain to me how it is working, and they're good students. And I've had to, and often I've had students who are not good enough. So in which case I have to come up with the ideas, but that's how it works. You have to know you have to believe that you can, then you can. Of course, you have to go into applied maths. I have not expected, other than Joanne and Jessica Leibig, who works at CSIRO. They are the only two of my PhD students who have done mathematics. Everybody else has done applied. And I don't find a problem with it. I'm just saying that's how it is.
Okay, if there are any more questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can ask them to Asha. But if there aren't any more questions, then can you join me again in thanking Asha for her fantastic talk.
Thank you, guys. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak.